Hello, everybody in Facebook world. Um, Thank you for tuning in. We'll give people a couple minutes to join here, and I'm sorry for a little bit of a delay. We had some technical difficulties, go figure. Um, but hopefully people are able to tune in now. If you are there, feel free to drop a comment. Let me know that you're hearing this. All right, looks like I'm getting confirmation. Awesome. So we'll give people a minute or two to get signed on here. Again, sorry for the delay. Had a little bit of a problem connecting, but hopefully it's working now just fine. All right, awesome. Looks like we are up and running, so hopefully people are hearing this and joining. I'll do kind of a slow introduction until we allow some time for people to listen in. I think the notification just went out, so I'll start by introducing myself. So I am Monica. I am based here out of our North American office for whale and dolphin conservation. Um, I am actually in our office right now for the first time in a little over a week since we've been working from home, keeping everybody safe. It's definitely a little weird to be here by myself. So hello to any of my colleagues who are out there listening in as well. But yeah, I hope everybody is staying safe and sane and learning a few things while you're homebound, having a good time, but definitely staying safe. So my goal here today is just to give everybody a little bit of an insight into our job as whale researchers and conservationists and what we do, an example of one of the things that we do to reach our goal of being a voice for whales and dolphins. So there's a lot of different things that we work on, and I think over the next couple of weeks as this goes on, we're planning to share some of those things with you. Hopefully you were able to catch the session on Monday with my colleague Sabrina, where she talked about baleen and how whales feed and the super important job that they do in the ocean ecosystem. If you didn't get to listen in with her on Monday, I think the video is still on our page, so definitely check that out. But today we're going to talk about how we identify whales and why that's important. So my goal is to teach everybody a few things, have a little fun while we're doing it, and I want this to be as interactive as possible. Obviously, we are doing what we can to connect with everybody, but I have some examples here that I'm going to hold up for you. I definitely encourage everybody to ask questions as we go along, and then definitely at the end, I want to make sure we take some time to answer any questions that you have. But definitely feel free to send them along. I have some of my colleagues who are also helping me to go through the questions and make sure that we are able to address all of them. So definitely send those along. As people are tuning in, I would love it if you can comment and let us know where you're listening from so we can see how far reaching we are right now. And anybody who's listening with kids, if you want to send along just at least the age of your kids so that I can kind of get a feel for who our audience is today. But I'll try to keep it pretty general. A lot of this is fun. When we talk about identifying whales, it's kind of like a big puzzle in a lot of ways. So I'm going to go over some of our process for that. And then towards the end, I'll wrap up by just kind of explaining why all this is important and why we spend so much time and effort doing this. So again, for anybody who's just joining, my name is Monica. I work here at Whale and Dolphin Conservation in North America. We're in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And we're going to talk about how we identify some whales. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about identifying humpback whales for a couple of reasons. One is because they're one of the main species that we spend our time studying and watching here off the coast of Massachusetts. So they're definitely one of our focal species, and we also know quite a bit about them. We work in partnership with some of the responsible whale watching companies we have here nearby. So if anybody has been on a whale watch, you know how much fun it is to watch humpbacks. They do a lot of really cool things out on the water. If you haven't been on a whale watch, when it is safe to do so again, I highly encourage it. It's a really awesome experience, and nothing that I can show you here will compare to seeing whales live. So definitely check that out if you get the chance. But hopefully this will also prepare you for going on a whale watch too. So humpbacks, they are one of the easier species to identify. There's actually around 90 species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises in the world. So there's quite a few. Humpbacks are one of the easier ones, and that is because they have some pretty distinct markings that we can use to tell them apart. So when a whale is diving, they often will bring their tail up out of the water. And the whole goal there is to make it easier to dive straight down into the water. They'll do this for any number of reasons. Some reasons we don't even know why, but for the most part, we think that they're diving down to look for food, or maybe to do some swimming down below where it's a little bit safer, maybe a little bit quieter. But when they do that, they bring their tail above the surface of the water. And on the bottom side of their tail, they have really cool patterns. And so the best the best example I can give you for what a whale's tail pattern is for them is our human fingerprint. So if you look down at any of your fingers really, but thumbprint mostly, if you look down, you'll see a whole series of like swirls on your thumb. And so no two people have the exact same fingerprint. So we are born with these patterns. We carry them our whole lives. Maybe we get some scars. I know I have a scar. You probably can't see it, but I have a scar on my thumb, and that is unique to me, and nobody else has that pattern and that scar on their thumb. So that is one of the more finite ways that we can recognize individuals apart from each other. Some of the more common ways as humans that we might do this is by looking at people's faces. So we can recognize somebody by the color of their eyes or freckles that they might have. I have some freckles on my face that people might be able to recognize me by. The length and color of your hair, how you style it, the way that you talk. These are all examples of how, as humans, we can recognize each other. But for us as humans to recognize whales, we look at these patterns that are on their tail. So I'm going to start holding up a couple examples and talk through kind of some of the whales that we have here. We've recognized over 3,000 individual whales by looking at their tail patterns. So we have a whole population of whales out there. We know a lot of these whales. We've recognized them. So it's been really awesome to be able to recognize them this way. I will start with one that we shared earlier, and hopefully these come through okay. I know it might be kind of hard to see through the camera, and especially some of these that are laminated might be a little shiny, but I'll do my best here to hold them up so everybody can see. This was a whale that we posted on our Facebook page. Oops, there's a little bit of a glare. A whale that we posted on our Facebook page the other day named Echo, and so this is harder than it looks. Down here, there are some marks here that look like an echo. And so Echo's a good example because she has a fairly clear marking. She's a whale that we know pretty well from being in these waters here off the coast of Massachusetts. And I say that her name is Echo because she was given that name. It is part of the process for us to give whales names so that we are better able to identify them. It's kind of fun to name a whale, but really the whole point of it is to make sure that they're named for something that researchers can easily see when they're watching these whales out on the water, so that we know more quickly who we're looking at. And so there are a couple of rules for naming, because as I mentioned, when you have over 3,000 whales, you sometimes have to get a little bit creative. We want to make sure that we are not giving multiple whales the same name, because that would just get confusing. They don't have last names, so it's definitely harder than humans. When we have the same first name, we have our last names to go by too. So one of the rules for giving a whale a name is that we try to make sure that their name is based on some sort of a marking that we can see on their tails. And so again, the whole point is to make sure that this is easy for researchers to recognize when we're out on the water looking at them. So no two whales have the same exact pattern. So basically what we do is we try to look at a whale's tail and try to find some markings that are unique and give it a name based on those markings. So I'm going to hold up another one here. So this whale Hopefully everybody can see that pretty well. This is actually a whale who was given the name Reflection, and she got her name because both sides of her tail have similar markings. So we're looking at the overall color, the pattern of black and white pigment. So she's got the black pigment in the middle, and then white, mostly white patches on the outsides, and then some spots that are similar on either side of the tail there. So she was given the name Reflection. So whenever researchers are out on the water and Reflection makes an appearance, we can look at her tail pattern, see how similar it is on either side, and then hopefully remember, oh yeah, that's a whale named Reflection. There's another whale named Mirror who was named for a similar reason, that it looks very similar. So that's one example. Let's see. Here's a fun one. Okay, so this whale, hopefully as I start holding these up, you'll be able to tell right away that just the overall pattern is different from one whale to the next. So this whale overall has more light than dark pigment, and pigment is another word for color. So this whale is actually, ironically, a whale named Giraffe. And so Giraffe got her name because of, man, this is so hard to do backwards and without seeing it. These spots right here that I'm pointing to, those spots there are, well, they reminded researchers of the spots on a giraffe, and in particular the way they're lined up like that, like the neck of a giraffe. So that's how this whale got her name. It might sound kind of silly that a whale is named after another kind of animal, but we have quite a few whales like that. Again, we're more focused on thinking of a name that will help us in the long run, as opposed to how silly or not silly it may sound. Here is another one. So hopefully you're able to tell. This one also looks very different. This whale is a whale named Coral. And Coral got his name for all of these like series of marks that you're seeing along the edge of his tail. And so if you've ever seen coral, you'll know that it kind of branches out in a bunch of different directions. And so Coral was named based on those markings there. And he definitely has a really interesting story, because the markings that you're seeing are actually spars from an orca. So when he was younger, he was attacked by an orca. We don't know exactly when or how it happened, but somewhere as he was traveling, he had an unfortunate encounter with some orcas. And so the reason we know this is because, I'm going to move this a little bit closer. When you look closely at some of these marks, you'll see that there's an equal distance in between each of those black marks there along the edges. And so we were able to figure out that those line up with the spacing of the teeth of orcas, killer whales. So we have seen a number of whales that have similar markings like that. But again, no other whale has the same exact markings as coral. And as I start holding these up, so I've shown you guys, I think, three or four now, you'll see that some tails are lighter than others. And so we also have a system for organizing those. Again, we have over 3,000 whales in our catalog. So when we're out on the water and we photograph a whale's tail, if we don't know who it is right away, which is the case a lot of the time because there are so many and none of us have a memory that's that good to memorize all 3,000 whales. Part of the research that we do is that we have to bring those photos back to our office and go through the catalog that we have. And then the catalog is basically like a yearbook for whales. So it's a way of having a picture, this identifying picture of all of these different whales. And in order to go through them more quickly and find our whale more quickly, we organize these whales by what we call the Fluke Rating. So we give them a number, and that helps us to organize them. So if we know we have a tail like Coral here again, who's pretty light, those whales get a rating of 1. And so 1 tends to be on the lighter side. Whereas some of the darker tails, like if we go back to Reflection here, she's got a lot more dark pigment on her tail, so she would have a higher number. And ratings go anywhere from 1 through 5. So if a whale's tail was completely dark, which does happen sometimes, and believe me, those are the hardest whales to figure out, um, those are going to be in the 5s. And so a 1 would be pretty much all white, a 5 would be pretty much all dark. And so to give you kind of a comparison before I show you a few more examples here, hopefully everybody can see this here. We have 4 different examples of 4 different Fluke ratings for these whales. So given what I just said, that 1 is the lightest and 5 is the darkest, I'm going to give you guys a second here to take a look and kind of think to yourselves what kind of numbers you would give each of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. All right, so let's see here. This one up here that's mostly light, that would be given a 1. The one right below that, which is pretty dark, you can still see that there are some white spots, some lighter spots on that tail, but for the most part it's pretty dark. So that one we would give a 5. Then over on the other side, so these are a little bit harder because they're sort of in between. So we do see every sort of combination in between light and dark. But between these two, I would say this one is probably about a 2. So there's still a little bit more light pigment than dark. The one below it, I could go either way on this actually, but most likely that's going to be a 4. So a 3 would be about half and half light and dark pigment. So I think this bottom one here is probably more like a 4. It's got a little bit more dark than light. But this hopefully helps to give you a good idea of examples of some of the different kinds. All right, let me see. What do I have here? Okay, I want to give you guys a chance to try to guess the name of a whale. Now, this whale is one of the, I'd say, easier ones, generally speaking. We were really actually grateful that this whale showed up because this whale basically has its name written out on its tail. That pretty much never happens. So when it came time for researchers to try to figure out a name for this whale, they didn't really have to think too hard because it literally says it on the tail. So it might be kind of hard to see through the screen and just with me holding up a piece of paper, but we'll see what we can do. So to kind of guide you to it, and I'll give everybody a minute here. If you think that you know or you can see the name of this whale, feel free to put that in the comments. I want to see how many people are keying in on this. But you're going to look over here, and there's a 3-letter word that's actually spelled out on this whale's tail. So see if we can figure out what it is. Good job, Allison. Let's see, can anybody else see what it says? I'll let you know too that this is also a good example. So the patterns that you're seeing here sometimes will change over time. So there have been a number of whales who have a tail that gets a little bit darker. So this is actually an older picture of this whale, and I picked this one because it is easier to see. It's gotten a little bit darker now, which makes it a little more difficult, but still fairly easy. Okay, so if anybody hasn't figured it out yet, hopefully you can see. So this whale says joy. So the hardest letter is the J right there, right above my finger. O-Y. So again, this was awesome. This whale kind of showed up. I think we did see it when it was a baby with its mom. So we call a baby whale a calf. So we've been watching Joy since she was a calf. And it was awesome. You know, we saw this pattern and it's like, okay, great. We don't have to think about what we're going to name this whale. It already says it on there. So again, that does not usually happen. That is a rare occasion, but we are grateful for whales that show up like that. So again, with over 3,000 whales in the catalog, we've had to get creative. And the process for this, it's not me that does it. I can tell you that. It's not whale and dolphin conservation that does it. It is a collaborative effort that's led by the Center for Coastal Studies, and they are based in Provincetown, Massachusetts. But it is collaborative, so a lot of the whale researchers in this area work together to suggest names for these whales. And then there's a voting process. So again, they have to follow the rules. We can't give a whale a name that's already taken. It has to be based on some sort of marking on their tail. There are occasionally a few exceptions to that, but again, that makes it easiest for researchers to remember their names. And it also can't be gender specific. So we don't always know whether a whale is a male or a female. So we would hate to start calling the whale Susan and then find out that it's a male just because as humans we associate Susan with a female. So we don't give them gender specific names. So we try to keep it neutral. So yeah, it's kind of a fun process. I'm going to give you guys one more practice here at being a whale researcher. So again, as I mentioned, we will take photos of whales when we're out on the water studying them. Hopefully we can get a picture of that tail, and then we bring that back to our office. And then if we don't know who it is right away, we have to figure out who it is. And I'll get to a couple of reasons for why that's important in just a second here. But basically, we're doing a comparison. So it's like a matching game. So we take our picture of a whale, and then we scroll through our catalog, again, using that numbering system. So 1 through 5, we start by guessing what number we think our whale has, and then start looking at that section of our catalog. And then we start scrolling through, and once we think that we found the match, then we're all set. So because these patterns can also change over time, we also try to make sure that we are finding multiple points on the tail that matches. So our rule of thumb is to find 5 points on a tail that match before we say for sure that it is the same whale. I don't know that you'd be able to see that level of detail here, so I am going to just show you this here. So what I'm holding up now, there are only 2 different tails. Does this line up well? Yeah. Sorry for my awkward peeking here, but I can't actually see around this full page. So there are 2 different tails here in these 4 pictures. So your goal is to figure out which 2 of these pictures match. So I'll give everybody a second. I don't really know that there's an easy way to say in the comments what you think the answer is, so just hold on to your guesses, and then I'll give everybody a couple seconds here before sharing the answer. You might recognize one of these. This is one of the first whales that I introduced you to today. All right, so you are going to hopefully have an answer that says it's diagonal. I can't, I'm sorry, you guys. I cannot figure out the diagonal in this mirror image facing away from me. How's that? Okay, so those 2 match, and then those 2 match, right? So similar overall color, but different patterns when you really start to look at those details. And so again, the one that I already introduced you to over here is reflection. And then this whale over here is a whale named Hancock, named after John Hancock, I believe, for the big markings here. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't always know the reason behind the names, but I believe that's what it is. Okay, so again, this has all been about humpbacks so far. We do have ways of photo identifying other species as well. And put over here because I'm going to show you my orca. Yes, we have little plush toys in our office. So if we talk about identifying orcas, they do not have patterns on their tails. Again, that is pretty specific for humpbacks. So for identifying other species, there's a couple different ways that happens. And this one is actually true for humpbacks as well, is that their dorsal fin can be unique. So they have different shapes. They might have some scars. They might have some cuts out of their dorsal fin. There may be some pigment markings on the dorsal fin as well. So that applies for pretty much any marine mammal species, at least the ones that have dorsal fins. That is the case for orcas. And then in addition to that, for orcas, they have these white patches on their bodies that are unique for individuals as well. So two of the main ones are the eye patch, which is directly here above their eye. That can be a slightly different shape and pattern. But then really one of the main ones is back here behind the dorsal fin. And this is what we call the saddle patch. And so those markings are unique for different individual orcas as well. So it's a combination of these different white patches as well as the dorsal fin shape and cuts and any markings that they might have. Another general thing that applies for all species is scars. Whales do tend to acquire scars over the course of their life for any various reasons. And so that's one of the benefits of also knowing the individual that we're looking at. If we're able to identify them based on some of their other markings, we know if they show up with a new scar, and we can keep track of that over time and make sure that we know what kind of health and condition that the whale is in. So that's actually a good segue into the next thing that I want to talk about is why we do all of this. It is a fun matching game sometimes. It is a frustrating matching game sometimes if you really struggle to find your whale. But there is a very important reason that we do this. And all of the work that we do here at WDC is meant to increase protections for whales. So we document them out on the water, we figure out who the individuals are, we keep track of all of that in our database. And this is all important because it does help to protect whales if it's done properly. So we share all of the data that we collect with our partners and our colleagues that we have relationships with. So a number of other organizations, we are not the only ones that have a catalog of humpback whales. There are multiple different organizations now that we work with. And so we share all of this data with these other groups because it's important to work together. None of us that are in this field of protecting whales and dolphins can be as successful as we are without working with other groups. So we definitely share our resources. And one of the other important things too is that the federal managers, so the people that are responsible for putting laws in place that protect whales, there are certain places that they go to have some verified information and data. And so it's important that all the data that we collect goes into those databases. So that is a big part of what we do. If we were to just sit here in the office or get some of our friends together and go through and match some whales, that might be fun for us, but it's not really doing the whales any benefit. So that is the one of the more important parts of this process, is to make sure that everything that we're doing does benefit the whales in the end. So we share all of our data. And when we recognize individuals, there's a lot that we can learn from that. So we know these individuals, we can track them over time. All the whales that I showed you today are whales that I've been watching for a while now. I've been with the organization since 2009. So over the years, we get to see a lot of these same individuals. And this is helpful because we can track them over time. We know where they're going. We know who they hang out with. We do think that whales have friends. We see a lot of the same whales hang out with their same friends year after year. So just like you and I have our groups of friends, we're pretty sure that whales do too. And we're able to track their health over time. So as we're out there documenting these whales, we can see how they're doing. If they do have a new scar, how severe does it look? Does it seem like the whale is impacted by it at all? Are there any signs of other health conditions? There's no real whale doctors necessarily. So if a whale is injured, the best thing that we can really do is just document them safely from a distance, not disturb them. But it is really powerful to have those photos in our database. And then knowing who the individual is by using the process that I just explained to you is how that kind of all ties together. We can create a life history for a whale. And then also, what's really cool, and some of you guys may have these as well for your family, is a family tree. So we've been watching this population of humpback whales here off the coast of Massachusetts. They've been studied since the 1970s. So it's a really long time. It's longer than I've been alive, probably longer than a lot of you have been alive that are listening. So there's a lot that we can learn over the course of that time. And so we have family trees for some of these whales. We've been watching multiple generations of their family. Anyone, I don't know if you can also in the comments let us know if any of you that are listening are part of our whale adoption family. You have a family tree for your adopted whale. So we do offer a couple of whales that can be adopted. And we're giving you updates throughout the year on that adopted whale and their family. But by recognizing these individuals, we're able to track their family members. So what I'm holding up here is the family tree for a whale named Salt. And Salt is one of the most famous whales, at least in this area. She was one of the first whales to be identified. And she actually breaks the rules a little bit in terms of whale naming, as I mentioned earlier, but they're usually named for a marking on their tail. She's sort of an exception because she has markings on her dorsal fin that were really unique. And so there's these white spots that kind of look like someone sprinkled salt on her dorsal fin. So that's how she got her name. Quick little side trivia question. She was traveling with another whale at the time. Can anybody guess what they would have named the whale that was with Salt? If you're thinking Pepper, you'd be absolutely correct. So again, that doesn't follow the rules that I just explained, but this was back in the early days before we had so many whales. But yeah, Salt and Pepper hung out together. And so anyway, they were some of the first whales that were named in this population. So Salt is pretty famous. She's kind of a celebrity whale. We always get excited when we see her on a whale watch, but we know 4 generations of her family. So she has sons and daughters. She has grandbabies. She has great grandcalves or great grandbabies. And so her actually, like you can probably tell, we barely have enough room on this one sheet of paper now to continue adding her family. Um, so I don't know what we're gonna do after a little bit more time goes by. So we'll just have to make it smaller, I guess. They're already kind of crammed in there. But anyway, so yeah, we're able to track these whales' families over time. We know 4 generations of her family. And the way that we know most of this is because the baby stays with the mom for about the first year of the whale's life. So they are born down in warmer waters in the Caribbean right around this time of year, and then they're going to start heading back up to our area. If anyone is from the New England area, you know that the water is really cold for most of the year, actually. But the whales will start to come up here soon in the springtime, and so the baby or the calf is still with mom during that time. So we get to spend most of our whale watching season here watching the mom with her baby, teaching it everything it needs to know. And then throughout that time, we're able to get those identification shots of both mom and baby, hopefully, of the baby. They're not always so good at showing their tails right away. So yeah, we know who a whale's mom is when we see it as a calf, and then we can track them over time and then see them with their own babies later on if it's a female. So yeah, we can build a family tree, which is pretty cool. And that actually might be a really fun activity for any of you who are sheltering in place or quarantining or just generally being socially distant. Maybe this would be an activity that helps you feel connected to your family if you can't be with them right now. So definitely, if we have any younger kids watching, have your parents help you figure out how to make a family tree. Might be a fun quarantine activity. So, and again, this is one of our whales that is available for adoption. So we have a few of them. Salt is just one example. And we have more information about that on our website at whales.org. So highly encourage you to check that out if you are interested. And yeah, as I start to wrap things up here, I'll see if anybody's asked any questions so far. We'll try to go back through and make sure we answer them. If you haven't asked a question yet and you have one, now is the time. I will try to hang out here for a couple more minutes and make sure that we get through all of these questions. But hopefully everybody has learned a thing or two today. again, if you missed any of the information in the beginning, my name is Monica. I work here at Whale and Dolphin Conservation in North America, and identifying whales is a really cool part of what we do. It's a really important part of what we do, again, all for the benefit of making sure that these whales have all the protections that they need so that they stay safe in their ocean homes. So you want to make sure that you have a safe place to live. Whales want to make sure they have a safe place to live as well. And we kind of fill the role of being the voice for them and making sure that as we study them out on the water, that everything that we do helps to guide the people who are making the rules to protect whales and make sure that they're staying safe. So okay, so our director here thinks she's funny. And she just asked a question that I know is a little bit sarcastic, but I'm going to answer it anyway. So there is a whale in this population named Nile. I don't have a picture of her handy, surprisingly enough. She happens to be my favorite whale, and that's for a couple of reasons. Again, I've been with the organization since 2009. I've seen her a lot since then. I've seen her doing a lot of really cool things since then. We were born the same year, so I just feel like we have this connection. But the question was, does she have any friends? And I'm going to say yes, that she does, because I think all whales have friends. But I know that the reason that she's asking that is because there was a study done for trying to figure out how whales feed and what they do when they're below the surface of the water. So cool. I see another comment. Allison also says that she's her favorite. So I'm in good company. Nile's one of my favorites. And I should say, too, as a side tangent, there was one year where she was one of the only whales that was easily found in this area. So all of the people that went whale watching that year had a great whale watching trip because of Nile. So I'll just defend her a little bit there. Anyway, this study that was done was trying to figure out what whales do when they're below the surface, because obviously we're just watching what they do above the surface, which is really only about 10% of their time. So we're only getting little glimpses into their life. So the researchers carrying out this project were with the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, which is a really important habitat for these whales right off the coast here in Massachusetts. And they basically put these suction cup tags onto the backs of whales, and they had a permit to do this, so nobody can just go out and approach a whale that closely. They had permission from the federal government to do this. They are a branch of the federal government. So they put these suction cup tags onto the backs of some of these whales with video cameras and a bunch of other fancy equipment to see what they're doing when they're down below the surface. And what they learned in that study was that Nile took advantage of the time and energy that other whales spent pooling fish together to eat. And so these other whales would make the effort of schooling together a nice close ball of fish, and then Nile would come in without doing any of the work and eat the fish. Now, some people say that's a little selfish. Personally, I think it's a pretty good survival strategy. So maybe she's just really smart. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, she's my favorite. If she steals fish, I'm sure that she participates in other feeding activities where she's doing more of the work. We just haven't documented that yet. So that's a little Nile story for you. We have a question. Do you know how many whales are in Pepper's family? That is a great question, and I should know that offhand, but I don't. We will definitely write back to you in the comments for that. Again, 3,000 whales, my memory is really, really not that great overall, so I'd have to go back and double check that for you, but it is an answer that we can get for you. All right, let me just see. Do any whales have great-great-grand whales? Another good question, and no, I don't believe so yet. Again, I'll double check that for you, but I think the most that we know is 4 generations. And I know I showed Salt here, and 4 generations of her family. She's not the only one to have great grand calves. There are a couple of other whales as well that are in that category. And again, this is all keeping in mind that there are some whales and salt, a lot of these whales who we saw in the early days of studying them that very well could have had calves prior to when we first saw them. So these are just all of the family members that we know about. There's a lot of whales who, if we don't see them as a calf in their first year of life, we don't actually know how old they are. So, a whale like Salt, who currently has, I think, 14 calves that we know of, she could have 10 others that we don't know about. So as far as what we know, no, I do not believe there are any whales that have great grandbabies. All right, you guys, these comments are awesome. How many whales do you think you have in your database? So we know of it. I think we're over 3,000 individual whales that we've recognized so far. So that number does continue to grow every year. Whales can have any number, of the population of whales that we see here, we can have any number of new calves that are added to the catalog each year. There are also some whales that we didn't see as calves, but they just kind of show up and we're not able to match them to any other known whales, and so they get added to the catalog as well. So every year our catalog is growing. We used to print out our catalog and have it as an onboard resource for whale watch passengers and for our interns to use when they're out on the water actively watching whales. But it doesn't fit in a binder anymore. There are so many whales. So, and also to be environmentally conscious, we don't want to waste any paper. And there's a lot of pages that go into it. So we don't print our catalog anymore for a couple of reasons, but one of them is because there are so many whales in the catalog. Let's see. Okay, well, hopefully my colleagues who are also listening in and going through the comments can let me know if I've missed any questions. Again, feel free to continue sending questions. Even after the live stream ends, you can still comment on the video and we'll get back to you. You're also welcome to email us your questions. Our email is contact@whales.org, WHALES.org. We're always happy to answer any questions that you guys have. We also understand this is a pretty challenging time for everybody to try to continue learning and stay involved. We're still doing everything that we can remotely and sort of adapting some of the things that we had planned, trying to make a lot more of our resources available online. So if you go onto our website, we do have a page with additional resources and activities and all sorts of fun things to learn about whales and dolphins. So definitely check out our website. We'll be adding more to it. Also stay tuned on our Facebook page. As we post additional resources and activities, we'll definitely share that with you through our Facebook page here. And we also are planning to do some additional live videos. So we have one more this week on Friday where my colleague Sabrina will be coming back again. She did an awesome job with our video on Monday. And again, if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely go take a look and learn about baleen and what that is and how whales use it. And we probably, since we don't know how long this quarantine will go on for, we'll probably continue doing these videos. So if you guys have any requests or ideas or things that you want to learn about, definitely let us know. We can add that into our schedule here. But we want to make sure that this is fun for you guys. Hopefully you had fun today. Hopefully you learned a few things today. And again, anyone who has not been on a whale watch and seen whales in person, I highly recommend it. It's an awesome experience. And when it's safe to go out in public and be in crowds again, I definitely encourage you to do that. It's just awesome. I have no other words for it. It's just a really cool experience. So yeah, somebody just asked if the current procedures are keeping us away from observing. So a lot of the data that we collect is when we are out with the whale watch boats. So we have pretty good partnerships with a couple of companies here. We're very grateful to them for allowing us to come on board. And so they are currently postponing the start of their season. Normally we wouldn't be out on the water just yet. There aren't really a whole lot of whales around, at least ones that we're aiming to study. We do have North Atlantic right whales who are in this area right now, but we definitely need to keep our distance from them because they're a critically endangered species. We don't really have too many humpbacks up here yet. Normally we would start whale watching in April, but so far I believe that's been pushed back till at least May. So depending on how long the current conditions go on for, yes, we likely could be impacted. But right now we're just kind of playing it by ear and hoping that we'll still be able to get out there and keep an eye on the whales that we have in this area. Okay, let's see. All right, a couple more questions coming in. So yeah, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. Again, I'm happy to answer questions as you guys have them. So let's learn about how you go about naming the whales. So I will say I personally have not yet named a whale. I have suggested some names, none of which have been voted on. Again, if anyone wasn't tuning in for the earlier part, giving a whale a name is a collaborative process. So a bunch of the researchers in this area will get together. It's all organized by the Center for Coastal Studies out in Provincetown, Massachusetts. They kind of lead this effort, and so we suggest names based on some of the markings that are on their tail. And I'll just hold up another example here again for anyone who may not have caught some of the earlier parts of this live video. But each whale has a slightly different pattern, and so we're giving them a name usually based on some of the pattern or the marking that you're seeing here on the tail. So this particular whale was actually really easy because over here it actually spells out the whale's name, which is Joy. So hopefully you can see Joy. But we try to make sure that they are given a name based on some of the markings that we're seeing on the tail. And the whole point of that is to make sure that it's easier for researchers when they're on the water. We want to make it easier to try to recognize who the whale is. And so the process for this is that any of the whales that are up for a name, the researchers in the community can suggest a name for the whales, and then it comes down to a vote. They bring it down to about 4 or 5 different options that have been suggested, and then there's a vote. And it's worth saying too that some whales actually don't get named if if people don't feel like any of the names are really helpful. We might pass on it and then come back to it at another time. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing some suggestions for other sessions that we have, so definitely keep those coming. Again, we appreciate your feedback, we appreciate your input. We want to give you information that you're interested in and that would be helpful. So there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about, so definitely keep those requests coming. I am going to end the video now, but again, continue to comment as you'd like. And if I missed any questions, we'll definitely be sure to respond in the text on the comment directly. So thank you everybody again for tuning in today. I hope you had fun. And again, our next video is scheduled for 3 p.m. Eastern on Friday. And we'll be learning about some of the things that you can do to help whales and to help us help whales. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and stay safe out there. Bye.